All right, welcome back, Ranger fans and Penguin fans. We got a very special crossover edition for you guys here today. This is John Chik with Locked On New York Rangers, joined by Hunter Hody of Locked On Pittsburgh Penguins. Hunter, how we doing today, buddy?
Not bad, man. The last of the 4 meetings of the regular season before, I think a 90% chance that these two teams will meet in the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. So this is a big one, especially for the Penguins. They got to try to somehow catch the Rangers for home ice, even though they've been a better team on the road. So this is still a big game no matter what.
Yeah, it's interesting. The Rangers have actually kind of closed the gap on the Canes a little bit. They're only 2 points behind them. The Canes do have a game in hand, but I'm with you, man. I've been thinking all along that it's going to be Rangers Penguins, and it does still kind of feel like they're sort of on a collision course, but I suppose you never know for sure. I mean, the Rangers and Penguins both somewhat within striking distance of the Carolina Hurricanes there. Very unique situation in the Eastern Conference where, we've known for a while, or we think we've known for a while, who the 8 playoff teams are going to be. And it pretty much is just coming down to seeding. And that makes this a big game tomorrow night. The winner of this game could very well go on to have home ice advantage if these two teams play each other in the first round.
Yeah, I mean, especially if it ends in regulation, Rangers win puts them basically 3 full games up on the Penguins, and the two teams there's really no games in hand. If I'm not mistaken, after I looked at the standings, the Penguins win a regulation. They're 2 back, and then, it gets more interesting again, especially down the stretch. So I know in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't probably mean too much just because, we're in the home stretch of regular season. The playoffs are about a little less than a month away. At this point, both teams are basically in the playoffs already. But it's your last chance to, maybe send a message going into a series saying, hey, from a Penguins perspective, we're not going to get bullied by you guys in 4 to 5 games. But I'm still excited to watch the game just because the Penguins, they haven't played as well as they have been as of late. They've lost 5 of 7, 2 in a row to the Avalanche, but the Avalanche also do this to everyone. So I think the Penguins are going to want to at least show that, these last 2 games, although they played fine, there's obviously a higher level to their game, to say the least.
Yeah, for sure. It's crazy to think. I mean, we are just, 11 games, I think it is now, away from the playoffs. I mean, the season has just absolutely flown by. But, I mentioned a second ago that it's a unique situation where, both these teams have known for a while pretty much that they're going to the playoffs. So I'm wondering, Hunter, like between now and the end of the regular season, is there anything big you would like to see from the Penguins? Something that they're doing well now that they need to continue to do, or something that they need to kind of get right between now and the time that the playoffs start? Anything that you could put your finger on there or point to is like, something that's going to be very important down the stretch here?
Yeah, obviously the hot take artists among some of the Penguins fans it's a little much, to say the least. They're still 19 points up on the New York Islanders. For the Islanders to catch the Penguins, Pittsburgh would have to lose like 9 or 10 in a row, and the Islanders would have to win 9 or 10 in a row. That's just very, very unlikely. But, I think some of the defensive work should be cleaned up a bit. I think Tristan Jarry's level of play has dipped. I think that's expected a little bit just because he's played most of the games this season. I think other than Vasilevsky, and I think another goaltender as well, he's one of the most played goaltenders in the league this year. Just because, Casey DeSmith, he's been a little better as of late, but when he was not playing well, Mike Sullivan would always go to him. And I think that's caused him to be a bit gassed, and his level of play, it's not at the level of what we've seen for most of the season. So if he can get right a little bit, that's going to go a long way for the Penguins, who he gave up a couple of goals in the last 2 games that I know he would want back. Excuse me. Defensively, they've been fine, but there have also been some spurts these last few games where they'll give up quite a few chances, and then they'll get back into the game with a goal, and then sometimes what's the word I'm looking for? I guess sometimes they'll revert back to how they were giving a lot of chances, and other times they're not giving up a lot, and it's like, okay, can we just stay more consistent here, to say the least? Offensively, if they can get their finishing, I've been saying this all year. Their finishing is in the bottom third in the league. I think it was the league's best last year. That's a nice little regression, obviously, for the Penguins. But if that can even be at the middle of the pack, I think that can also solve a lot of their problems as well. Getting healthy, I think that's huge too. I think Jason Zucker is going to be playing in this game after it looked like he re-injured himself last week against Minnesota. He fully practiced today. Brock McGinn is also very close. I'm not going to say the word, obviously, just because of the Penguins. They're never fully healthy, but I think those are the main things that I do want to see here down the stretch. Just, mainly more consistency. Their play has not been bad. It's not like they're not really showing up for games. It's just that, the goaltender has not been making the same amount of key saves as he was for most of the season. Defensively, they've let up a little bit, which has caused, the opposition to score more goals and, what's usually happened this year. And, the finishing continues to just, not be there for a lot of players. But if those can, we can see some regression with those few things, these last 11 games going to the playoffs, I'm going to feel a lot more confident about them going in, obviously, to the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Yeah, for sure. And it's kind of interesting hearing you say all that, because there's some things that you said there that definitely apply to the Rangers as well. Igor Shesterkin, obviously he's having a Vezina-worthy season, and I think he might even be in the mix. He might get at least a couple of votes for the Hart when it's all said and done here. But if he had, anything resembling, a valley this season, a not so good stretch, it's probably been over the past, 8 or 10 games. And that's not to say he hasn't played well. He has at times. He's had a couple of hiccups along the way here, though. And it gets to the point where, as a Ranger fan, you're just so used to seeing this guy basically be a human cheat code night in and night out, that to see him, be anything less than that is actually, really striking and really surprising. But I'm not too worried about it. I'd rather see him go through, a mini slump now than when the playoffs roll around and it really matters. I mean, I'd almost rather him get this out of the way and, work his way back to being the Igor Shesterkin that Ranger fans all know and love. And you also mentioned, team defense, which the Rangers 2 games ago, I think it was probably the worst defensive game that the Ranger defensemen have played this entire season. I mean, just turnovers left and right. The amount of odd man rushes that they gave up to the Flyers of all teams was just staggering. Like every time, yeah, Penguin fans will appreciate that, I'm sure. But yeah, every time I blinked, it felt like, there's a breakaway. Owen Tippett had about 4 breakaways in that game alone. And Igor Shesterkin stopped him every single time. So that was getting to be a little ridiculous. The nice thing is the Rangers were down 3-0 in that game, rallied to tie it, ended up losing in a shootout. So obviously a mixed bag there. But the Rangers really had kind of a get-right game in their most recent game against the Devils. Just played much better team defense. It was like night and day. Alex Georgiev had a nice, start for himself as well. He's played a lot better recently. And, down the stretch here, I'm kind of looking for the Rangers to basically treat this almost like an open tryout kind of a deal, because the Rangers, at the trade deadline, they acquired a lot of pieces. Justin Braun has kind of been in and out of the lineup as the Rangers, 7th defenseman. And then you've got guys like Frank Vetrano, Andrew Kopp, Tyler Matu who've all come over, and it's great. This team is a lot better, but it's created some competition. And, given the fact that, again, the Rangers and Penguins have some breathing room, I think the Rangers can now kind of, experiment a little bit. And, again, just kind of treat this as an open competition. Hey, if you want a spot in this lineup in the playoffs, then go out and get it. I mean, it really is up for grabs right now, and I think that's the way that it should be for sure.
Yeah, the Penguins, they don't really have too many competitions down here, though. There is, I think the last spot defensively, it's going to be Marcus Patterson or Mark Freeman. Mike Sullivan has been putting them in and out of the lineup just to see who he likes more. Marcus Patterson, I don't know why I said his name twice in 5 seconds. Patterson got kind of cooked twice in the same sequence against Colorado, and I understand the Avalanche will do that to basically every team, but it was not a good look for someone who is trying to stay in the lineup over a guy like Mark Freeman, who, he's a total chaos kind of player. He jumps into the play a lot more, is fine defensively. His underlying numbers are also pretty good. I don't really mind whichever way they go, but, it still wasn't a good thing. He's getting walked by, I think it was JT Compher, and I believe it was O'Connor of Colorado. It was 2 sequences in a row that actually led to Colorado taking the lead halfway through the game on Tuesday night. So I'm curious to see what Sullivan does for this game. I would like to think Patterson may get another shot, but I also would not be surprised if Freeman does come in. The 12th forward spot is also going to be, I think, up for grabs with Jason Zucker coming back. The only injured player is Brock McGinn, though he is very close. He's eligible to come off IR on Saturday. He's already back practicing. He's going to be back in the lineup. So who's going to come out? Is it going to be Brian Boyle? Is it going to be Danton Heinen, Evan Rodriguez? Who knows at this point? Other than that, I think those are the 2 main competitions for the Penguins that Mike Sullivan is looking at here down the stretch. Really, everyone else in the lineup is set in stone. And I'm glad that, the lineup, it looks more formidable when Jeff Carter is not on Evgeny Malkin's wing, because for as much as I've loved Jeff Carter, he has sank that line with him and Ricardo Raquel. Getting Jason Zucker back, it's it's massive for so many reasons. I know obviously his injury history and people like to bag on him just because he makes a lot of money, he doesn't score a lot, but he does all the little things very well. And heck, he had an assist on his first shift back last Thursday against Minnesota. So I just think, especially him coming back is going to make the lineup that much better. And I'm going to be curious to see, with him coming back, how that, that last forward spot goes and defensively too.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation for sure. And it's funny, you mentioned Brian Boyle. Obviously, he spent a couple of seasons on the Rangers, back in the day. And, he's somebody that I always root for because he's obviously been through a lot. And it's cool to see that he's carved out a nice role for himself with your Penguins there. But I will say this, it's not going to break my heart if these two teams play in the playoffs and he is a healthy scratch, because this guy for the Rangers, he always did something positive when it came to playoff time. All of a sudden, Brian Boyle starts contributing offensively a lot more than you expect him to. He scored a really big goal in Game 7 when the Rangers and Penguins played each other. Geez, that was like 8 years ago now. It's crazy. But as a Ranger fan, I'd be happy to see him not in the lineup, especially because every time the Rangers play one of their former players, guaranteed that guy is going to impact the game and probably get on the score sheet and maybe even get the game-winning goal. So if you want to leave Brian Boyle in the press box, I'd be all right with that.
Now I'm just picturing, the series goes to Game 7. It's like double overtime, and Brian Boyle just somehow scores the game winner. And then I really don't know what Rangers Twitter will do. I think they'll probably just self-combust at that point. It would be a pretty poetic ending to a series.
That would be rough, man. I mean, I'm telling you, he's got a big moment in him, especially once again after, everything that he's been through with his illness and, now obviously back playing hockey. It really is great to see. But, you mentioned Ricardo Raquel a second ago, and I wanted to ask you about him because he's one of the kind of the big move that the Penguins made at the trade deadline. And, somebody that I know the Rangers were looking at least a little bit. So I'm wondering, I looked at his stats. It looks like he's off to a pretty nice start for you guys. But how have they been kind of deploying him, and what are you seeing from him? How's he fitting in with the Penguins so far?
Yeah, so we started out, playing in the bottom six, but that was not going to be the case moving forward. He quickly went up to Evgeny Malkin's right wing. And, he stayed there, and they have really good chemistry together. When Zucker was playing in that period with Malkin and Rakell, the numbers were pretty good. And that's a line that I want to see more of here down the stretch to see if that can, stick for the playoffs, to say the least. But, Rakell has a great shot. His playmaking ability is also pretty underrated too. And, the Penguins are not a physical team. That's, again, I've said this probably about 5,000 times. Brian Burke is probably not happy about that. But he brings a physical element that, the team, kind of lacks a little bit because, he's not afraid to throw the body around. He's also pretty decent in front of the net, but man, that release is just something else to see. He's also, he'll go on the second power play unit, and it's almost like he's like a one-man zone entry. He'll take you on 1-on-3, 1-on-4, no matter what. He's almost had a couple of highlight reel goals when he's do that, just because, he's so silky with the puck. So I've really liked what he's brought to the team so far. I'm not really sure if he's going to be on the team next year, but, I'm not really thinking about that right now. I'm glad to see that, he's been producing. He looks like a good fit on Evgeny Malkin's line. And, if they can just sort out that left wing spot and hopefully Zucker stays in the lineup for the rest of the season in the playoffs, Penguins are going to have two really good lines in the top six that they can deploy out whenever. Because, when someone like Jeff Carter is on that line with Malkin and Rakell, they just can't do the same things that they can do with someone like Zucker on there because he's a better forechecker. But I've really liked what he's brought here. The cost to get him was really whatever to me, a second-round pick, a goalie prospect when you have a lot of goalies in the system, two bottom six wingers who, maybe one of them will be in the playoff lineup, but at the end of the day, I think they're both replaceable. To say the least. I'll throw that right back at you, John. You obviously the Rangers did make a lot of moves. Before the deadline, I was looking at their forward depth. I'm like, okay, this is probably a team that has 1.5 lines, and I think that's almost it. And obviously Adam Fox is great on the back end, but 3 big forward acquisitions. They can actually, roll 3 to 4 lines now. What have you seen from those acquisitions? And, speaking of Frank Vetrano, he always scores against the Penguins. He has 8 goals against them in his career. Started out in Boston, continued in Florida, now it's continued in New York. So I am fully expecting a Frank Vetrano goal against the Penguins tomorrow, but wanted to throw that back out at you.
Yeah, no, it could definitely happen. Vetrano's look good. I would say he's got to be among the biggest steals of the trade deadline season. The fact that the Rangers only gave up a 4th-round draft pick to get this guy, and they bring him in, and, he's immediately, in a top 9 role, and in pretty short order, they've actually had him playing with Mika Zibanejad and Chris Kreider for, I'd say, at least the last 5 games or so. He's been great. The Rangers at times, and they've gotten better at this, but there's times in the past where they're selfless to a fault. Everybody wants to pass and set up their buddy for an easy tip-in goal. Vetrano isn't worried about that. I mean, if he gets the puck and he's in any kind of decent real estate, he's throwing it at the net, and he's got a heck of a shot. So he's really been a welcome addition to this team. And, Andrew Kopp, another big pickup as well. It's funny because, we were obviously covering our teams during trade deadline day. And the 2 names that I kept hearing were the Rangers were either going to get Rakell or Kopp. And I was kind of torn between the 2 of them. But Andrew Kopp has done a heck of a job. The thing I love about him is he can play, any of the 3 forward positions. So you get some versatility there. He can play on the power play. He's a great penalty killer. He's one of those guys, the way I've described him, he's like a B+ at everything. He might not be a superstar in any one singular asset of the game, but this guy is just a rock solid all around player. And, now that Ryan Strome is back into the lineup, you've got a second line of Panarin and Strome and Kopp. And that's the best that second line has been, I would say, probably all season. Capo Caco's been out of the lineup with an injury. And for a while there, they were putting Brayden Hunt on the second line with Strome and Panarin. And it's nothing against Brayden Hunt. He's a hardworking player. He's somebody that's carved out a bigger role for himself this season than I think a lot of people expected. But he's not a top sixer. And I've said as much on my podcast. There's too many times this season where, there's one great pass, and then there's another great pass, and then it gets to Hunt, and he just can't finish. And that's not his fault. That's not his. It's not his MO. Is producing all kinds of offensive fireworks. I mean, he chips in offensively once in a while, but to say the Rangers upgraded as far as depth and the top 6 is definitely an understatement. And just looking forward to seeing what these guys can do because we haven't really seen Kopp, Panarin, and Strome together. Strome was out of the lineup with an injury up until this last game, so definitely looking forward to seeing how those 3 can play together.
Yeah, it's crazy how both of our deadline acquisitions are playing really well, and John, I wanted to get your your thoughts on this too. The 3 games this year have been very different. I think in a lot of ways. That first one, Penguins were the better team. I thought the Rangers played well, but the Penguins were able to get the power play goal at the end. They deserved to win that game. The second one, Penguins didn't show up. The Rangers blew them out of Madison Square Garden. The third one, I thought it was a 50-50. That was my opinion. And then the Rangers were able to come out on top. Penguins had a nice push in the third period after Sidney Crosby made it 3-2. Had a couple of crossbars in there. And this is what I think a 7-game series may look like. Maybe take out a blowout loss for either team. It's going to be really close. And I feel like that's what we're going to see in this game on Thursday. I think these 2 teams are, I like the Penguins' depth better, but I also know that the Rangers have a very easy way to win this series in the playoffs. Good goaltending. They're very patient. I feel like, I talked about this with my buddy Nick Zararis, who covers the Rangers for Gotham Sports Network, and he does a podcast. I feel like the Rangers remind me of, I guess, a mini New York Islanders in a small way, that they don't really give you a lot. So, and that's been the Penguins' kryptonite in the playoffs these last couple of years, going up against the teams that make them play really patient because they just want to go run and gun. That's been their MO for as long as Mike Sullivan's been there. But, sometimes less is more for a team like the Penguins. And, if they can figure that out against the Rangers, I feel like they'll be able to beat them in a series. So I'm really curious to see that aspect against New York for this final meeting, because again, these 2 teams are probably going to play in 4 weeks' time.
Yeah, I think it could be a little bit of a grind. I think you'll see, kind of a playoff type atmosphere as we've seen, when these teams have played each other in the other matchups this season. And Hunter, if you and me can figure this out, that these teams might be playing each other in the playoffs, I'm sure everybody on both these teams can figure that out as well. So I expect it to be very physical. Maybe there's even a fight. I mean, it's possible. But yeah, I mean, I think the Rangers, they're a much better defensively responsible team this season than we've seen in other years. This recent game against the Devils, the Rangers only put 4 total shots on goal in the second and third periods combined. And despite that, it felt like they were in complete control of the game. And as recently as a season ago, there's no way that would have been the case. If there was a situation where the Rangers only putting 4 shots on goal in 40 minutes, they're losing that game. They got no chance. So it's a team that's matured, has committed to defense, I think, a little bit more. And obviously, Igor Shesterkin certainly helps with that. It kind of starts with him. But there was actually a matchup that I wanted to ask you about, Hunter, because I noticed in the last game, and I checked the stats today, and this is indeed still the case. Rangers right now have the number 2 power play in the NHL. The Penguins have the number 2 penalty kill. That is going to be a massive matchup, not just in this game between the Rangers and Penguins tomorrow, but also in the postseason if they do play each other. Who are some of the big time penalty killers on this team, and what's kind of keyed the success that the Penguins have had when they're down a man?
Yeah, so the main one is Teddy Bluger. I mean, he is what makes this unit go. When he was out of the lineup for a good bit, the unit was still fine. Zach Aston-Reese was filling in for him, but it wasn't, top 2, top 3 in the whole league good. But the fact that he is back, he takes away so much of the ice, and he's also a great threat shorthanded. I mean, he's probably one of the 5 best penalty killers in the league if I had to pick. At least in my opinion. And the Penguins, they always have a really good structure on their penalty killing unit. They call it about like a wedge +1, where they have a player up top. He usually causes all the chaos, but then the Penguins, they have this little triangle that protects the slot areas, and they want the opposition. Obviously the Rangers right here, they want them to shoot from those low danger spots and not get it 10 to 15 feet from the net. And last time when these two teams played in Pittsburgh, Chris Kreider got a power play goal. He was right by the net. I think it was kind of almost a good bounce off the end boards, and he was basically right there to corral the rebound. If I'm getting that goal right, I think at least he was right there, and there was really no traffic for him. It was just an easy tap in. So the Penguins, they're going to obviously have to watch out for him just because he's been so good on that unit this season. But it's just that they play a really good style on the PK, and it's driven a lot of teams' fits, to say the least. So it's almost like an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. Obviously, the Rangers have a lot of talent on that power play. Fox quarterbacks it. Kreider's been incredible. Panarin's a hell of a passer and a shooter. Zibanejad can do it all. So the Penguins they're going to have to be on high alert for this one. But it mainly starts and ends with Teddy Bluger. They'll also put Brian Rust out there if they want to. Chris Letang will kill penalties. John Marino. They'll sometimes put the stars out there, though it's usually it's some of the bottom sixers who are good at even strength, and it's also some of the defensemen who are a bit more mobile than some of the others. So I'm really curious to see this matchup as well, because the Penguins, again, one of the main differences in that last game, it was, I believe, 2-1 going into the third period. Rangers get that power play because of Mike Matheson. I think he cross-checked one of the Rangers players. They scored on it, and that was the difference in the game. So if the Penguins are able to win the special teams battle and keep it to 5v5, obviously I think they'll have a better shot at winning this game as opposed to taking a bunch of penalties.
Yeah, it's absolutely huge. And I think with the Ranger power play unit, the biggest thing that they have going for them, I mean, on top of just the fact that it's a really talented bunch out there, is this has been the Ranger top power play unit for, I think, like 3 seasons now. I mean, every team makes adjustments, and they'll move guys around and up and down the lineup and everything. It's always these 5 guys on the power play. It's Strome, Panarin, Zibanejad, Kreider, and Fox. And, I mean, like you said, they just complement each other very well. Panarin can shoot or he can pass. Kreider's become just an absolute lethal weapon with his deflections in front of the net. Strome, he can pass. He scored on the power play the other night. Zibanejad, they've moved him over to the left side on the power play unit, which is usually where Panarin is. But when Panarin was out of the lineup for, I think it was like a game or 2 earlier this season, they put Mika there, and he was just rifling these one-timers and scoring on a couple of them, looking dangerous on a bunch of them. So that's obviously been a revelation. And Adam Fox, I mean, again, he's the quarterback out there, does a great job. And, it's crazy because the Rangers, they do have the number 2 power play unit in the NHL. I don't think their second power play unit has scored 5 goals this season. I'd be very surprised if they have that many. And
I think it's the same with the Penguins too. I'm pretty sure they have hardly scored at all this season, just because Sullivan he'll put out the top power play unit for most of the time. But even when it's half of the time, which he does a lot too, that second unit comes on and they'll generate some chances, but the puck just does not go in the back of the net. So we definitely relate to that.
Yeah, it's a little bit of the chicken and the egg. Does the second power play unit not score because they're not getting ice time, or are they not getting ice time because they're not scoring very often? It's definitely a little bit of that. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy because Gallant at times, you got to tell me if Sullivan ever does this. Depending on the situation, the game, what the score is, how much time is left, all that. If the Rangers get a power play, say they're like down by a goal with 10 minutes left in the game. If they get a power play, obviously they'll go with the top unit. And if there's a play stoppage, like a minute 10, a minute 15 into the power play, Gallant will call the timeout that he has and give his top guys a breather and then put them back out there to finish the power play. Do the Penguins do that?
Mike Sullivan has been doing that a lot more.
Wow.
lately, to say the least. It was actually a game against Buffalo about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. They're down 1 in the third period. They're generating chances, and Mike calls the timeout. He's like, all right, you guys obviously been doing something. Tar Reardon draws up a play. That play works to perfection. They score on it, and then the bench is just going crazy because, I'm glad that coaches are starting to catch on to that tactic because it works a lot. So, Mike Sullivan has been doing that a lot more, and on the offside, when the Penguins call off a penalty, he will actually put Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, and Jake Gensel on the ice at the same time to go attack the other goalie and get chances. They haven't scored on a chance yet, though they've come really close numerous times to doing that. So that's going to be an interesting matchup to watch tomorrow to see how the Rangers defend that, because the Penguins, they've been doing that a lot more lately and trying to get Sid and Gino on the ice together.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. I feel like every time we do one of these crossovers, Hunter, we find like more parallels and more similarities between these teams. I mean, I know it's a great rivalry and they've had all these crazy playoff matchups over the years, but two teams that are built somewhat similarly. And, obviously that coaching tactic is kind of just the latest example of that. I wanted to ask you, though, because, obviously we're talking about a potential playoff matchup between these teams. And I did notice today, looking at the standings, the Penguins actually have a better road record than home record. And it's not a dramatic difference, but they are better on the road than at home. Is there any little part of you that thinks like, oh man, maybe we're better off just going on the road and not having home ice advantage? Or do you want those games in Pittsburgh as often as possible in the playoffs?
Yeah, I don't, it's weird. Usually they are one of the best home teams in the league. I believe a few years ago, I was trying to think of the record off the top of my head. It was somewhere like 32-6-3 or something like that. It was by far and away the best home record in the league. Now, fast forward to this year, they've been anything but that. Heck, even last year they had one of the best home records in hockey as well. They're usually automatic at PPG Paints Arena, though. When they've gotten home ice, especially last year against the Islanders, it didn't really mean much. They went 1-2 in that building. Heck, going back the year before that against the Islanders, they didn't have home ice advantage, but they lost both the games at PPG Paints Arena. It hasn't been the same since, honestly, that Cup run in 2017. I don't know the reasoning for it. That's a building that has been very kind to the Penguins numerous times over the years, but they've been a better road team. I can't figure out the reason. Maybe it's because they weathered the storm better, but I don't really think it's that big of a deal for the Penguins this year, just because, hey, maybe they don't need home ice to advance past the first round for the first time since 2018. They've had it once. Obviously, last year didn't work out. The bubble was a bit different, but we'll see. I think it's whatever to me. If they have to go to New York and play the first 2 games there, they got to steal home ice. If they come to Pittsburgh, then they come to Pittsburgh. So. That's how I feel about it.
I hear you, man. I feel like it's going 6 or 7 either way, no matter who gets home ice advantage. And you probably won't have a situation where the home team wins all 7 games. I mean, that very rarely happens anyway in hockey. It happens quite a bit in basketball, but this is not basketball, obviously. And one other question I had to ask you, though, as far as this game coming up here, do you have like an under the radar Penguin that Ranger fans should be keeping an eye out for in this game? Somebody who maybe isn't a household name, but could impact this game one way or the other.
That's a good question. Some of the depth has been lacking, I guess, a bit lately. I don't really know if he's a household name. He was obviously great at the early parts of the season, but I do think Evan Rodriguez could potentially impact this game because he finally broke out of a long slump against Colorado. Bit of a lucky goal. Devon Taves kind of put it in, but he got his 18th of the year. But maybe that's the goal that finally puts him in the right direction again. Coming into that game, had basically 2 goals in his last 34, 35 games, something like that. Just been not the same player than what we saw the first half of the year, where he was scoring goals at will. It's hard to believe right now he's, only 2 away from 20. Heck, he should be at 20 plus goals right now. But, it's just the production has been lacking, even though he's been, I think, getting chances on the regular. The puck has just not been going in the net, in my opinion. So I think he could definitely do something. Danton Heinen, if Mike Sullivan wants to play him a bit more, he also could play a bigger role. I think he hit the post once or twice in that last game in Pittsburgh. The game potentially could have been a little bit different. If that chance goes in, the Penguins, again, I think they had like 2 or 3 posts in that game. Very unlucky, of course. That's how a lot of the game of hockey goes. So those would be, the two names that I would keep my eye on. Though, I'm going to be curious to see, with Jason Zucker's likely second return from injury now. Well, honestly, it's his third. Just how the depth is going to be now that he's hopefully back in the lineup whole time. So I think those are the two names that I would look for sure.
Fair enough. For the Rangers, one name that I'll throw out for, your listeners and Penguin fans in general, I'll say Brayden Schneider. And obviously, he's not a household name yet, but he is a former first-round draft pick. The Rangers called him up in the middle of the season, and he is just 20 years old, but, he looks wise beyond his years. He does have a hiccup every now and then. He is a 20-year-old rookie after all, but he looks pretty comfortable. He throws his weight around. And he laid a big hit the other night against the Devils, and then Igor Sharangovich jumped him, and Brayden Schneider won that fight with ease. I'll just put it that way. You can go back and watch it if you want to. But, for all those reasons, again, big physical, tough player. I have a feeling he could influence this game one way or the other. Of course, once again, he is a rookie, so there are some hiccups and some mistakes every now and then. But I get the feeling before this one is said and done, one way or the other, Brayden Schneider is going to, make himself known, on the ice for sure. How about predictions, man? You got a final score for this or anything specific to happen?
Every time I do that, I do sometimes I do some betting articles sometimes for the game day, and I pick the Penguins to actually beat the Avs. I'm not jinxing it again. That's for sure. I think it's obviously going to be very close. I'm going to say it's going to be a 1-goal game. Every time I think I pick the Penguins to win, I just get really bad mojo. So I'm gonna keep my mouth shut.
Fair enough, man. So I'm actually going to go against the grain a little bit, and I hope Ranger fans don't get too mad at me, but I'm actually going to take the Penguins to win this game 3-2. The way I see it, these three previous matchups, other than the one where the Rangers, basically just ran them out of the rink.
Yeah.
The other two games were really close, really competitive. These teams obviously have similar records. They're built similarly, and I just get the feeling that we're kind of destined for a regular season split here heading into the playoffs. I don't know. It just feels appropriate. And, obviously the playoffs, it'll be best of 7. We could technically call it a best of 11 if that's the case, because both teams will go in, having 1-2 each. So, I don't know. I just get the feeling that we're kind of destined for a split here. I would love to be wrong about it. But I think maybe the Penguins just barely edge this one out, by a final score of 3-2. But I will say the Rangers, their penalty kill has been very good lately, and they've been really close to scoring while shorthanded in a handful of the most recent games. So I will say also that the Rangers score a shorthanded goal at some point in this game here.
All right. Well, I hope at least one of those things comes past. The Penguins, again, they badly need a win on this game. They lost 2 in a row. It's fine if you lose to Colorado. They do this to everyone, but I feel like the Penguins definitely deserve a better fate in the one on Saturday for sure. They tied it up with 5 minutes left. Should have gotten at least a point and taken it to the 50-50, which is 3-on-3 overtime. But Colorado was able to score 30 seconds later, and that was that. And then Tuesday, obviously. So this is a team that's kind of in a little bit of a dry spell just because the schedule's gotten so tough. It's going to get even tougher on Thursday. I'm excited to see how if the Penguins can rise up to the occasion and maybe send a message here to the Rangers going in the playoffs saying, hey, we're not going to back down from you all, and we can beat you, at your place, to say the least. So I'm really excited for it.
Yeah, it's going to be must-see TV, in this regular season matchup, and certainly if they play each other in the playoffs as well. But, yeah, Hunter, listen, man, there's a ton of fun as always. Always a good time, linking up and doing these crossover episodes here, and we'll definitely have to do it again if and when these teams are playing each other in the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be down for it. And, for all the listeners out there, and I believe this is an exclusive ESPN Plus Hulu game, so if you don't have a subscription, you're probably going to have to find a third-party streaming site for it.
Yeah, I'll have to try to finagle some kind of a free trial or something like that again, but we'll find a way to watch the game, that's for sure. But, yep, Hunter, pleasure as always, and Ranger fans, Penguin fans, we'll see you guys next time.